Hello again, fellow audiophiles, and oh my goodness, it's an IEM review, okay? Wave Theory is doing an IEM review. I don't know if that'll focus or not, but it is the Mangird T, okay? Why am I doing an IEM review? We'll get to that in a moment, but first remember to like and subscribe and do those things that you do to support YouTube channels. And I really appreciate all the support I have gotten to this point and hope that it continues. Alright, the Mangird T. First of all, you're probably used to me doing a bunch of full-size headphone reviews, and that's mostly what I have done on this channel, so that's not surprising. And I have mentioned on this channel before that I don't really like IEMs that much, so why am I doing this? Well, I used to, when I would go to the gym anyway, I still like to go to the gym, but when I would go there, I would use a pair of V-Moda Crossfade M100s because they are built like tanks, they are really durable, they sound pretty good, they were easy to power off of my Radsound Ear Studio 100 Bluetooth mobile DAC amp. Alright, and enjoyed that quite a bit. Unfortunately, one of the screw joints in there fell out and the whole cup fell off and I don't have screws to replace it and so forth, and I don't know if you can buy just those screws. And then a friend of mine was selling his Mangird Ts, and I'm pretty sure these are V1s. Pretty sure. I bought them from him right around the time the V2s had like just come out and it was a little unclear, but I'm pretty sure they're V1s, just for what it's worth. Anyway, he was selling them at a really good price. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I will get a pair and just like try to get used to IEMs again and maybe, you know, expand my channel into that someday. Maybe. This is not me saying that I have a bunch of IEMs lined up to review. I don't, but just to kind of get into that idea and just play around with IEMs a little bit more. Now, so I did, okay? These are $299 US MSRP. So that's decent price, you know, not ridiculous price anyway, to get started. And again, I bought them for significantly less than that because I bought them used. Alright, now, what is my experience like with IEMs though? It is much more limited than it is with full-size headphones. I have used, in terms of the audiophile space, I have used the TIN T3s, the KNYB04s, the Bella NCM V2s, no, sorry, I said that backwards. The NCM Bella V2s, excuse me, the Jomo Flamenco, and I very briefly had a pair of Jomo Cats that had been reshelled away from custom, but there was something up with those, so I had to give those back. But anyway, my experience with IEMs is not that great, and I have struggled with them because having them in my ears for any length of time has irritated my ear canals. But then again, I got these and have like said, you know, that I will use them while I work out so that I can, you know, get my brain thinking about other things while my ears adjust to them and get used to having things in there. And you know, that has worked. It has worked, and I've been able to enjoy these quite a bit. So, why am I reviewing these right now? Well, I've had them around for a while, think it's time to talk about them. And then also, I am just a little bit between headphone reviews right now. I've got some cool high-end headphone stuff coming out for you, full-size headphone stuff coming out for you, hopefully in the near future, but it's just not ready to go yet. So let's talk about these. Alright, so the T is a, I believe a 6-driver, maybe 7. Anyway, there's one dynamic driver in here and then either 5 or 6, I'm having trouble remembering the number off the top of my head, balanced armature drivers in here. So that's a thing they do with IEMs. They just pack these things, these small housings with drivers. It has a 2-pin connection for it on the cabling, and I am so sorry my cable got wrapped around my tripod and you might hear that. 1 second. Ah, got it. Oy. Alright. Okay, so this is the stock cable. Okay, it has these, you know, around the ear 2-pin endings there on the IEM side, and it ends in a 3.5 millimeter single-ended connection. It is about that long. Okay, it's not bad. It's has a little bit of memory. It does have a square weave on it, but it's not terrible. It's been better. I have been using for the 4.4 millimeter Pentagon balanced, a triple win 8-core cable, I believe, 2-pin there. when I have plugged these into my XENNS Mark II DAP with the EO2 module. It has the 4.4 millimeter balanced Pentacon output. So the ES100, the N6 Mark II have been how I have powered these two things for testing. Or the two devices I've used to power these things for listening and testing. And here's the thing, I like them, I enjoy them. Sonically, they are pretty good. I'm gonna go through the strengths and weaknesses like I do with all of my reviews, but yeah, there's not a whole lot for me to complain about for the price at $300 US. So yeah, let's get into that. Oh, I should say that, I mean, I think they look pretty. They have a nice design. I don't know how well that will show up on the camera, but they have a nice design on the back of them on the shells. They look good. They are made out of a, you know, they are made well. They feel like they could last a while. And yeah, let's see. I think they are rated at 18 ohms and 112 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. So they're, you know, they're IEMs. They're not particularly difficult to drive or anything like that. Okay, let's get into the sound. Let's talk about the thing that stands out to me, and like, why is it that I have gone with the Mangird T's to like get used to IEMs. So the IEMs that I just named a moment ago are the ones that I've done in the audiophile space. Years ago, I would have, like, you know, I called them earbuds because I didn't know any better at the time, but I'd have some IEMs that were either Bluetooth or wired that I would use that were like $50 sets, or, you know, if that, $30 to $50 sets that I would use while I'd go to the gym and all of that. And they always sounded IEM-y to me. Like, and what I mean by that is there was something, some timbral quality in the upper mids, lower treble, where they just sounded a little tinny, a little bit small. Those that I just mentioned to you a moment ago, the K and YB04s, the TIN T3s, the even the Bella V2s, still had that timbral quality where it's just a little bit metallic-y, a little bit just sounded tiny in that particular frequency range. They could have great thunderous bass, a lot of them could, but just in that range, they had a quality that just stuck in my head of that's what IEMs sound like. These do a pretty good job of not doing that, and so I like them for that reason, and that's why I have kept them around. So one reason that I have gone with the Mangird T's is that to my ear, they are the least IEM-y sounding IEMs I have used to this point. And again, I have not used a ton, so just keep that in mind. Okay? All right. So then the sound of these beyond that. Let's talk about the frequency response. It's pretty good. It works, but it's a little quirky at the same time. There's a slightly elevated deep sub bass. There's a lot of low bass rumble here with some pretty good macro dynamic punch and slam to it too. So it has a bit of a deep bass shelf. Then it dips a little bit. It sounds to my ear. So somewhere like in around 80 to 100-ish hertz, and then up through 500 hertz, I want to say. It sounds like there's a bit of a dip. Like that region is just a little bit lower than neutral. Not bad. It's just a little bit recessed. So like these, even though they're bassy, they don't sound very warm because that region is brought down just a hair. Then from about that 600-ish, maybe 700-ish hertz, up to about 1200, 1300 hertz, there's also just a slight bit of a shelf again. Okay, so that region is just a little bit more forward. Not bad. I don't like elevated 1 kilohertz ranges usually. It sounds shouty and honky to me, but these never sounded shouty and honky, so for whatever reason it works. Then it seems to dip a little bit again and then go back up as you get into the region where there's the peanut gain. If you look at frequency response charts a lot, you just see this hump around, you know, starting around 2.5, 3 kilohertz up to about 5 kilohertz. And all that's that peanut gain region. Okay, so these do elevate there a little bit, but then they fall off a little bit on the high side of that. And then there is a peak which probably lands pretty close to where the peak resonance usually happens. There's a resonance peak on a lot of IEM measurements in that around 8K, and I think this probably has that a little bit, but a slightly elevated 8K region relative to what's around it. The reason that, like I said, high bass, a bass shelf, a slightly elevated mid-range, the reason I have not called them W is because the treble is not elevated either. So they're not really bright, nor are they dull, nor is the treble like too aggressively rolled off. It's not. Okay, so emphasis on the bass, the deep bass, a little bit of emphasis on a good chunk of the mid-range, to the point where it's like emphasized over a wide enough range that my ears don't detect shout. And believe me, my ears detect shout quickly. Okay, and then rises up again in the area where we want it to for the first half, and then falls off a little bit. So the treble isn't super forward. It's there, it's present. Now, the treble has a local peak. There's a little bit of sibilance to it, a little bit of shimmer. It doesn't come across as overly aggressive or bright or shimmery as a general rule, because the level of this peak is in line with the rest of the frequency response. It's the stuff around it that is recessed a little bit, which just leaves a peak there. So again, a touch of sibilance, not bad. It's not bad. It's quite acceptable, at least to my ear, in that regard. So the frequency response works, but it is a bit wonky. Still, even with that, like the tonal balance is usually pretty good. The timbre is generally decent. They're not going to be world-beating timbre, not the best timbre I've ever heard from a head-based audio system, okay? But also far from the worst, and towards the good side, I would say. Then you add in like that deep bass also comes with some good punch, like kick drums have a good solid thump and pop to them, like, so I like that. That's good too. Detail retrieval for $300 here. These are pulling out a lot. Ghost notes on drums, room reverbs, like audience noise if you're at a live performance, chair creaks and, you know, coughs and sniffles of a symphonic recording, that sort of thing, all there, really good. Overtones and harmonics of bass guitars and like bass guitar string noise is there and presented really well. You've got to spend a fair amount of money on full-size headphones to get that kind of thing to come out, and these bring that out fairly well, I would say. Okay, so the detail retrieval, the resolution, very good. You get a lot of sonic information at the $300 price without it being forced. Like, it's not aggressive in its detail retrieval. It comes across fairly natural in the way that it does that. All right. The sound stage is pretty big. These throw a pretty big stage, both in terms of width, height, and depth. Not excessive in either direction, but they create a fairly large sense of space, I would say. And then the imaging and the separation and being able to localize sounds within that sound field, also very good at $300, I would say. Just pretty enjoyable in that regard. So, I mean, they get a lot right. That frequency response, a little bit wonky, but the timbre and tonality is not adversely affected all that much. Okay, it's still quite enjoyable and listenable to my ear on those things. The spatial presentation is quite strong and all of that. So I think like these present a really good value at $300. And if you're like me and you're primarily a full-size headphone user, they are a really good way, without breaking the bank, to start exploring IEMs and, in my opinion, not deal with that IEM-y sound where there's like too much treble, too much bass. Like, you know, it's one of the least wonky frequency responses that I have heard or seen talked about, at least from what I know, for IEMs, you know, under 500 bucks, I would say. Like, it's pretty well balanced in its signature for that, even with the wonkiness that I talked about a bit ago. Now, on that soundstage for a moment. On my ES100, I thought left center and left right were pulled back away just a little bit. I think that might be an artifact of Bluetooth. Okay, so again, this is primarily used for Bluetooth, and even using LDAC, the staging, like, it kind of did, so for me, right, it's left for you, but for me, right, it's here, and then it comes in, it kind of moves away from me, and then center is pushed at me a little bit, and then center left for me kind of recesses a bit, and then center comes back. Plugging these into the N6 Mark II fixed that, just nice and coherent across the sound field. So I don't think it's the IEMs. I think it's probably an artifact of Bluetooth, and they're in the sound field. So keep that in mind, that might happen to you possibly on a lesser expensive or a Bluetooth device if you want to power them that way. But yeah. Back to, I think these are a really good way to get into IEMs that don't break the bank, but also don't come with a lot of the drawbacks that I perceive IEMs at the lower end of the price scale to have sonically. And yeah, so I mean, they're easy for me to recommend. I like them. I will continue to use them for working out or maybe even travel, because my ears are adjusting to them and starting to get a little bit better about having them in there for a while. So I really can't compare these to a lot of other IEMs directly. I like to do comparisons in these reviews because I think that's useful, particularly if you are have heard a thing that I'm able to compare to. But I can't really do that here because I've not heard a ton of IEMs. However, I will say that based on my knowledge of the full-size headphone game, these are really a good value sonically. You get a lot of good sound here for 300 bucks, and I will just leave that there. So, yeah. Mangird T, I'll give it a thumbs up. It's a good little IEM there, I think, and yeah. So, I am Wave Theory. This has been, thanks for starting to explore IEMs with me. And again, I cannot promise that I will have a lot of IEM reviews coming up, because I don't have any others lined up. We'll see what happens. I do have some more full-size headphone review stuff coming out very soon too, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, I will leave it there. This has been my review of the Mangird T. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the music.